Welcome. This time we are going to talk about Amendments 11 and 12. These two amendments are just simply ironing out wrinkles that came as the Constitution's feet are on the ground in our young country. And, our nation was running up glitches here and there. And so they needed amendments to tweak the Constitution to make it work best. So let's start with Amendment 11. Amendment 11 says the judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. All right, so that is legal, old constitutional language that just simply says if you live in one state, you're not allowed to sue a different state, like the whole state. So a citizen of Maryland cannot sue Pennsylvania. That's how it works. Or a citizen of France cannot sue Pennsylvania. All right, so that is simply how that works. And the story behind that is we came up with a Supreme Court problem. What happened was there was a man named Chisholm. Alexander Chisholm was representing a person who lived in South Carolina. They wanted the state of Georgia to pay the Revolutionary War debts that were owed to them by the state of Georgia. So Georgia had loaned them some money, evidently, or they had loaned Georgia some money, evidently, and Georgia hadn't got around to paying that debt. So Chisholm sued Georgia on their behalf and took it to the Supreme Court, citing Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution that says that the judiciary could decide between a state and citizens of another state. So that by that Article 3, Section 2, he was allowed to do that. All right. Georgia, on the other hand, goes to the Supreme Court with him, and they say, wait. This violates our sovereign immunity. So this is a hot topic for these guys. All right, so states had started out, in the birth of our country had started with the Articles of Confederations because each state wanted to retain their sovereignty, their self-rule. Only the Articles of Confederation were a hot mess, and self-rule totally didn't work. So they needed our Constitution to pull everybody together. So states gave up some of their sovereignty so that they could be part of a federal system, but they still retained some sovereignty rights. Just like as citizens, we give up a few of our natural rights in order to enjoy the protection and safety of all of our many rights under the Constitution. So that's what we call the social contract. That's what our Constitution is. All right, so Georgia says, look, we have sovereign immunity, which means that people from another state can't come and sue us. We're immune to suits from people from another state unless we give them permission to sue us. Can you imagine a state giving permission to somebody to sue them? But I haven't seen anybody address that. Anyway, so the state said we have sovereign immunity, and they fuss at the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court said, no, we're going with the Constitution, and Chisholm wins this one. So Georgia owed their Revolutionary War debts and had to pay them. All right, so the states were upset about this, and so they decided that the Constitution needed to be tweaked. So what they did is they went according to the Constitution. If you want to amend the Constitution, you go to Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. You get a bill passed for an amendment, and then that amendment needs to be ratified by three-fourths of the states. That's the way that works. And that's what the states did. They went to Congress, said, here's the problem. We want to make sure we still have a voice. We need our sovereign immunity. And Congress says, you know what? We better tweak things because we got to hold our nation together. And so they passed Amendment 11, and it was quickly ratified. So from the Supreme Court trial in 1793 to the ratification in 1795, it was just 2 years. So this was a perfect example of the people, or the states in this case, saying we need to tweak the Constitution. So it was our first real test of the constitutional process, and it worked. And that's how these days, if we need a constitutional change, it still works. Okay. All right. So let's talk about Amendment 12. So, Amendment 12 is a big one. Okay. Here we go. All right. So, Amendment 12, I am not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to put links to the National Archives where you can read that. But I'm going to read part of it. It's an amendment that tweaks the Electoral College. And this is a great story. Okay. So, we got good American history stories. Amendment 12 addresses a couple of things. And we'll start with the first thing. Is called the favorite son clause, and it clarifies that. I will read it to you, and then I won't read the whole rest of it. So the favorite son clause says, the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. All right, so that's called the favorite son clause. A favorite son is a person that's running for office, for federal office in your own state. So, like I live in Maryland, so if I was voting for a candidate from Maryland, they would be our favorite son. So that is how that works. The problem is you end up with a hot mess. You can have 50 states, the electors each voting for somebody from their state. Nobody ever gets past the favorite son. So we've got to have some rules. So you can only vote for one candidate from your state. All right. So that is the favorite son clause. Now, the rest of this amendment deals with taking care of a problem that arose in 1800. So in the original Article 2, Section 1 that set up the Electoral College, each Electoral College member, or elector as they are called, was given 2 votes. So they voted for 2 candidates. They couldn't put 2 votes on one candidate, but they voted for 2 candidates. All right, the candidate who had the most votes became president, and the candidate with the second highest number of votes became vice president. And that in the past had been awkward but workable. Like the president became like John Adams, who was of one party, and Thomas Jefferson, the VP, was of a different party, but they got through that. They made that work. All right. But in 1800, the Electoral College votes were everybody votes in their state. The Electoral College sends it to Congress. Congress counts it. And Congress, when it is counted, they found that Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, who were both running for president, tied. Their votes were tied. All right. When that happens, the Constitution requires that the House of Representatives votes. They do a vote between those two to decide the winner. All right. So the House of Representatives is holding the responsibility of voting between Jefferson and Aaron Burr. It's February. It's snowing. It took 6 days of them slogging through the snow, into the House of Representatives. It took over 6 days, 36 rounds of voting for the House to finally settle on Jefferson as the president. All right, so the gossipy backstory to that is that the rumor says that Alexander Hamilton. All right, so here we have, let us get our pictures. So here we have Thomas Jefferson is chosen, all right? And the runner up becomes the vice president, and that is Aaron Burr. All right. And then what happens is that Alexander Hamilton sticks his nose into it because Congress can't break the tie. They can't do it. And so Alexander Hamilton goes around before that 36th round, and he says to his friends, because he's a man of influence, he had friends there in Congress, and he said to them that Jefferson was by far not so dangerous a man as Burr. So that's evidently a quote. Now, Jefferson and Hamilton were not good buddies. They were kind of rivals, and so they weren't overly happy with each other. But Hamilton liked Jefferson better than Burr. Hamilton thought Burr was kind of a dangerous guy. All right, so that convinced enough of the House of Representatives to swing their vote to Jefferson. Thus, in 1801, Jefferson became the president of the United States. So, because we never had a President Burr, right? All right, so what happens then, of course, in the backstory is Burr has all kind of feelings about, he wanted to come out on top on this, so he lost because Alexander Hamilton was saying things about him. And when that relationship that was troubled anyway, grew to the point where these guys end up facing each other in the famous duel in 1804. One of the things that Burr complained about Jefferson was that Jefferson had said he was by far more dangerous than Jefferson. So that is, the gossip behind how Jefferson became president. So anyway, that's the story. So they had this hot mess in 1800, and they had to get it fixed. All right. So what they decided to do, because they found a wrinkle in the Constitution, they needed to iron the wrinkle out, is they appropriately went to Congress. I mean, Congress went to itself and said, we need a vote on changing the Constitution's rules for the Electoral College so that electors get their 2 votes, but one has to be for the president and the other for the vice president. And so you don't end up with those 2 guys running against each other and ending up with a hot mess in the House of Representatives. And so now electors vote for a presidential candidate and a vice presidential candidate. Those are 2 separate things they are voting for. And that's how we got Amendment 12. Now, interestingly, our Constitution can continue to be amended. If we have a problem with the Constitution, it is amendable, but it's amendable by the process of our House of Representatives and our Senates answering to we the people and to the states. They draft a bill, the bill is passed, then it is ratified by the states. It's a process, but that process works. And so that is how we preserve our freedom, is by going back and noting the Constitution can be tweaked if we need it, but there's a process of doing that. Yay for processes, and yay for a Constitution that guarantees us our freedoms and natural rights.